was living in an apartment at the time, and he shows up. I open the door, and there's this bad Zero Mostel comb over out of the relationship between father and daughter. And we chose you because just like Carol O'Connor, you have blue eyes and a fat face.
When the first serious concerns connected to Rob Reiner began circulating quietly through Hollywood, most people assumed the response would follow a familiar pattern. A brief written statement, neutral language, careful phrasing about privacy and respect. Then silence. That's how these moments are usually handled in the industry. But this time, something very different happened. Instead of a controlled press release, the public heard from someone no one expected to speak at all. Sally Struthers.
Marrying him, there was silence on the phone. They were on extensions in their house. Nothing. And then Carol said, we only meant for you to go to dinner with him, not marry him.
And what she shared didn't feel rehearsed, polished, or strategic. It felt deeply personal, almost uncomfortable in its honesty. The kind of emotion that makes people pause a video halfway through because it feels too real to absorb all at once. This wasn't a former colleague revisiting memories for attention. Sally spent formative years beside Rob, growing up with him on the set of All in the Family. Their bond wasn't just professional, it was foundational. And according to those who know her well, what she finally chose to say had been weighing on her for a long time. She wasn't offering accusations. She wasn't making claims. What she expressed was concern, the kind that comes from watching someone you love slowly change and not knowing how to help without crossing a line.
We're pretty much the same age, but he was light years ahead of me in terms of the industry and the business of show. And I was maybe in my third or fourth year of the show with him. And he brings one day into rehearsal hall and slaps a book down in front of me and says, read this. I said, why? He says, I've just acquired the rights to it, and as soon as my contract is over with All in the Family, I'm going to make this in.
Sally admitted she had stayed silent for months, not because she didn't care, but because she was trying to protect Rob's dignity. She believed speaking publicly too soon might do more harm than good. But eventually that silence became heavier than the risk of speaking. When she finally talked, her voice carried frustration, sadness, and something else. Fear, not fear of scandal, but fear that something deeply unhealthy had been unfolding behind closed doors. She mentioned concerns involving Rob's son, Nick, carefully framing everything as worry, not blame. Her language was deliberate, restrained, and clearly chosen to avoid turning pain into spectacle. At one point, she shared a line that instantly changed the mood of the room. She said, "We all saw the bruises on his soul, but we were too afraid to ask about the bruises on his arms." It wasn't meant literally. She later clarified it was emotional language, a metaphor for distress that people noticed but didn't know how to confront.
Off screen, he and his wife invited me to everything that they went to and really shared their lives with me.
Sally then described the last lunch she shared with Rob just weeks earlier. She emphasized that moment because it was the final time she saw him in person. What she described didn't resemble the outspoken, fiery director the public knows. She said he seemed smaller somehow, withdrawn, on edge.
Move over here. And then on page 4, when the girl says that, it was the strangest phenomenon that I was Sally until he got...
He checked his phone constantly, reacting every time it buzzed as if he were expecting bad news. When she finally asked if something was wrong, she said his response stayed with her. According to Sally, he looked exhausted, not physically, but emotionally drained in a way she hadn't seen before. She quoted him directly, saying, "I don't know how to stop him, Sal. I love him, but I'm terrified of him." At the time, Sally assumed he might be talking about industry pressure or political stress. She didn't jump to darker conclusions. Only later, as other conversations surfaced and timelines began to overlap, did those words take on a different weight. She was careful to repeat that she wasn't accusing anyone of criminal behavior. What she described was emotional fear, the kind that quietly erodes someone over time. And according to her, she wasn't the only one who noticed it. That's where Tom Cruise enters the story, not as a public commentator, but as someone who had known Rob closely for decades. Their connection from A Few Good Men wasn't just professional. People close to both men say Tom has always been highly sensitive to shifts in behavior, especially when it comes to people he respects. Sources claim Tom quietly expressed concern long before anything reached the public, not through statements, not through the media, but privately. And while none of this has been officially confirmed, multiple individuals close to the situation describe a pattern that feels deeply unsettling in hindsight. According to those accounts, Tom didn't just hear rumors. He allegedly witnessed a situation firsthand that disturbed him enough to act immediately. The story goes that in November, Tom visited the Reiner home under the normal excuse of discussing a possible future project. On the surface, nothing seemed unusual. But behind closed doors, the atmosphere reportedly felt tense and volatile. Sources allege that the situation escalated quickly, centering on Nick and involving intense emotional exchanges. There are no claims of physical harm. What shook those present was the level of emotional intensity. Voices raised, demands made, and a sense that the situation was spiraling beyond control. What reportedly stunned people most was Tom's reaction. Known for discipline and composure, he allegedly stepped between Nick and Michelle Reiner, not dramatically, but instinctively, simply trying to de-escalate the moment. According to private conversations later shared, Tom described Nick's demeanor as deeply unsettling. Not angry in a typical way, but empty, unpredictable, and difficult to read. Again, these are reactions, not diagnoses, not accusations. Afterwards, sources say Tom pulled Rob aside and spoke to him without softening the message. He allegedly warned him that the situation felt unsafe and urged him to make changes immediately. Whether that meant setting firmer boundaries or physically separating for a time, the message was clear. Something was wrong. Rob's reported response broke the hearts of those who heard it. He didn't deny the tension. He didn't minimize it. But he defended his child. According to sources, he said something close to, "He's sick. We can't abandon him. He just needs one more chance." That wasn't weakness. It was love. But love without boundaries can quietly become dangerous, not through malice, but through exhaustion and denial. Sally unknowingly echoed that same pattern when she spoke later. She admitted she wished she had pushed harder, spoken louder, and refused to accept explanations that no longer made sense. She said Rob had slowly withdrawn from friends, canceling plans, avoiding gatherings, and isolating himself in ways that felt unlike him. One moment she shared stayed with people. A small reunion dinner had been suggested by longtime All in the Family cast members. Nothing formal, just familiar faces. Rob declined without explanation. Sally said that hurt more than she expected. Then she described driving past the house about a week later. Not to intrude, just to check in. It was midday, but every blind was shut. The house didn't feel lived in. It felt sealed, heavy, closed off. She texted Rob to say she was nearby. Hours passed before he replied. His message was short. "Not a good time. He's home." Just 3 words. But now, those words carry a weight that's impossible to ignore. What shocked people further was what Sally revealed next, the financial strain beneath it all. There's a common belief that wealth shields families from crisis. She quietly dismantled that idea. According to her, Rob had been selling assets behind the scenes, not for luxury, but to manage ongoing issues tied to Nick's struggles. She didn't present numbers. She presented worry. She described Rob as frantic, exhausted, and constantly trying to keep things from exploding, paying problems away, buying time, hoping love would be enough. What makes this so painful in hindsight is the realization that the danger may not have been outside the gates at all, but already inside them. Then Sally Struthers shared an incident that still deeply unsettles her, even now. She chose her words with care, repeatedly stressing that she was not accusing anyone of wrongdoing. What she described was a moment that, in hindsight, no longer felt as simple as it once did. About 6 months earlier, during a family gathering, Rob Reiner reportedly suffered a serious fall down a staircase inside the home. At the time, the explanation was straightforward. An accident, a slip, something unfortunate but ordinary. Rob was treated for a broken wrist and visible bruising on his face, and the story was accepted without challenge. No one pushed further, no one asked questions. But Sally said that when she visited him in the hospital, something didn't sit right with her. She emphasized that this was not evidence, not proof, not an allegation. Just a feeling she couldn't shake. The pattern of bruising didn't match what she personally expected from a fall. It made her uncomfortable in a way she couldn't logically explain. In a rare moment of emotional honesty, she said she asked Rob a simple, direct question. Not angrily, not confrontationally, just quietly asking if everything was okay. According to Sally, Rob didn't answer. He looked away. Then he began to cry. There was no confirmation, no denial, just silence. And that silence, Sally explained, can sometimes say more than words, especially when it involves parents and their children. She spoke about the shame that traps people in situations like this. How do you tell anyone that the child you raised may also be the source of your fear? How do you even allow yourself to think that thought? That's where Tom Cruise enters the story again, according to people close to him. Sources say Tom tried to intervene in a different way. Not publicly, not emotionally, but practically. He allegedly offered to cover the cost of an intensive, high-security rehabilitation program for Nick Reiner, one of those facilities designed for extreme cases far removed from Hollywood, attention, and access. According to those accounts, Tom told Rob something close to, "Let me take this burden off you." But Nick reportedly refused to go, and Rob, according to people who knew him well, couldn't bring himself to force it. Love, guilt, and hope were tangled together. Tom later confided to friends that watching the situation unfold felt like witnessing a tragedy in slow motion, seeing where things were heading, but being unable to stop it. That sense of helplessness keeps coming up in every version of this story. As public discussion slowly began, familiar narratives started forming. Mental health, emotional breakdowns, confusion. And Sally was clear. Those conversations matter. But she firmly stated she did not believe this situation was sudden or random. She spoke about patterns, about cycles of behavior where calm moments, apologies, and reassurance would rebuild trust just long enough for things to reset, before the tension returned again. She described it as psychological exhaustion. Not chaos every day, but constant emotional strain. Living on edge, never knowing which version of the situation would walk through the door. Then Sally addressed the question many people were quietly asking. Why speak now? And why her? Her answer was blunt. Hollywood protects its own until silence becomes impossible. The idea that someone as respected and admired as Rob Reiner could be living in fear didn't fit the image. And images, she said, are everything in this industry. But silence doesn't erase reality. It only delays it. At 77 years old, Sally made it clear she's no longer interested in protecting reputations that failed to protect the people she loved. She openly criticized what she described as a long line of enablers around Nick. Friends who looked the other way, people who kept showing up when they shouldn't have, and professionals who, in her view, failed to step in when warning signs were flashing. She wasn't claiming crimes. She was calling out negligence, a system that kept offering chances without consequences. A culture where a famous last name softens responses and turns urgency into delay. Then Sally shifted the focus to someone she said had been carrying the heaviest burden of all, Michelle Reiner. Up until now, most attention had centered on Rob. But Sally described Michelle as the true buffer inside that house. The mediator, the peacekeeper, the one constantly stepping in to diffuse situations before they exploded. One of the most chilling things Sally shared was deeply personal. She said Michelle once admitted to her that she had started sleeping with her bedroom door locked. Think about that. Locking your door inside your own home, not from strangers. From fear you can't even say out loud. According to Sally, Michelle told her, "I wake up to the sound of footsteps in the hall and my heart stops." That single line speaks volumes. This wasn't occasional tension. It was constant anxiety. Sally described Rob and Michelle as prisoners in their own home, not trapped by walls, but by love, fear, and denial. They poured everything they had into trying to hold things together, and by the final days there was nothing left to give. According to information Sally says was later shared with her, the final incident did not unfold in a single explosive moment. It escalated slowly over multiple days. Neighbors reportedly heard raised voices on and off. Nothing specific enough to justify an emergency call, just enough to feel uneasy. And here's the uncomfortable truth, Sally pointed out. In places like Brentwood, people don't rush to call police on famous neighbors. They assume someone else will handle it. They turn up the TV. They mind their business. That hesitation may have allowed the situation to continue unchecked. Sally said Rob reportedly made a phone call that night, not to emergency services, but to a private security company. He wasn't asking for punishment. He was asking for help. The call was logged, a response was dispatched, but timing mattered. By the time assistance arrived, sources say the situation had already crossed a line no one could reverse. People close to Tom Cruise say he was furious when he learned about the delay, but they also believe Rob likely minimized the danger during that call. He wouldn't have said, "We are in immediate danger." He likely said something closer to, "My son is having an episode." Because even then, even in the worst moment, Rob didn't want his son treated like a criminal. He didn't want handcuffs, he didn't want police. He just wanted things to calm down. There's something deeply human and devastating about that instinct. The instinct to protect your child, even when protecting yourself should come first, is one of the most powerful forces a parent can feel. Sally Struthers said that Rob Reiner never stopped being a father, not for a single second. She emphasized that Rob didn't resist in those final moments, not because he was unable to, but because he chose not to. According to what Sally was later told, Michelle Reiner tried to protect herself, while Rob focused on calming the situation, trying to slow it down, trying to keep it from escalating, right up until the end. That image stays with people. A man known for speaking loudly about justice and fairness, choosing love and de-escalation instead of self-protection. It forces uncomfortable questions about family, fear, and silence, about how deeply love can complicate action. Now, as Nick Reiner remains in custody and legal teams prepare their narratives, a storm is clearly forming. Mental health will be discussed, responsibility will be debated, systems will be questioned. But Sally made one thing painfully clear. This didn't happen suddenly. It wasn't a single moment, it was a buildup. And far too many people, she believes, noticed warning signs and chose to look away. The next battle won't exist only inside a courtroom. It will unfold over the story itself, over how Rob and Michelle are remembered, and over what version of events the public is asked to accept. Sally Struthers understands exactly how that process works, and she's openly worried about what comes next. Just days ago, she made a public plea that felt urgent and deeply personal. She didn't speak to lawyers or insiders. She spoke directly to the public. She begged people not to allow the narrative to shift in a way that puts Rob and Michelle on trial in their absence. She warned that familiar strategies may appear, portraying them as controlling, emotionally harmful, or manipulative. Sally said this pattern appears again and again in high-profile family cases, where accountability becomes blurred and people who can no longer speak are quietly blamed. She didn't soften her words. She said Rob's greatest flaw wasn't cruelty. It was softness. He was too forgiving, too patient, too hopeful. And in her view, that was the only thing he ever did wrong. Behind the scenes, sources say Tom Cruise is preparing himself for the possibility of testifying if the case proceeds. The idea alone has stunned many people. One of the most recognizable figures in the world potentially taking the stand, not against a stranger, but against the child of someone he deeply loved. People close to Tom say this isn't about anger, it's about preserving the truth. He wants the timeline clearly established. He wants early warnings acknowledged. And he wants it on record that help was offered and refused. According to those sources, Tom believes intent matters, that moments of clarity existed, that choices were made, and he doesn't want those moments erased by vague language or emotional deflection. Sally then addressed the most uncomfortable truth of all. She said this story didn't begin in adulthood. She reminded people that we all watched Nick grow up publicly. Red carpets, smiling photos, headlines celebrating a lucky childhood. But she believes there were warning signs long before, not loud trouble, quiet trouble, the kind that sits behind the eyes. She shared a moment from years ago at a rap party that still haunts her. According to Sally, Nick was found alone in a back room, calmly damaging property. No shouting, no tears, just focused, deliberate behavior. When Rob confronted him, she said Nick didn't panic or apologize. He smiled. That smile, she said, chilled her. She claims she pulled Rob aside that night and urged him to seek serious help immediately. And she was clear. They did try. Doctors, specialists, programs. Every resource money could provide. But she added the part that matters most. You can't fix everything with resources. You can't buy empathy. You can't write a check that guarantees accountability. Since Sally spoke out, the industry response has been swift and revealing. Public associations are quietly disappearing. Old photos are being removed. Invitations are being rewritten. The distancing has already begun. But Sally isn't backing away. She says she has nothing left to protect. No favors, no politics, no career leverage. Only the truth as she experienced it. She wants people to understand that Rob Reiner wasn't just a famous man involved in a tragic story. He was someone living under sustained emotional strain inside his own home. And that reality doesn't match the stereotypes people expect. We struggle to see powerful people as vulnerable. We assume wealth equals control. We assume money solves danger. Sally said love does the opposite. Love freezes action. Love delays decisions. Love convinces you tomorrow will be different. As for the funeral, sources say it will be intensely private. No spectacle. No public display. Tom Cruise is reportedly helping quietly behind the scenes, focused on privacy and security, not attention. Because even now, Sally believes Rob deserves peace. She has said she will speak publicly one more time and only once. She revealed she has written a letter to Rob, a final letter. She hasn't shared its contents, only that it finishes the conversation they never completed, during that lunch weeks before everything unraveled, and that alone says everything. There is a lesson buried in this story that many people don't want to face. It's about the limits of love. We grow up believing love fixes everything, a message echoed in so many films Rob himself directed, that patience and loyalty guarantee a happy ending. But real life doesn't follow scripts. Sometimes love isn't enough to save someone who refuses help. And sometimes, despite everything you give, that person pulls everyone else down with them. Sally broke the unspoken code of silence not for attention, but to give Rob something he didn't have at the end: honesty. She said that in his final moments, Rob wasn't a legend or a public figure. He was a father, afraid, exhausted, heartbroken. And in saying that, she gave him his humanity back. As the legal process continues and court filings slowly emerge, one truth keeps echoing louder than the rest. Warnings were seen. Concern was felt. Isolation grew. This didn't happen overnight. There were moments where the path could have changed. Moments where firmer boundaries or outside intervention might have altered the outcome. But love complicated action, and now all that remains is silence. The silence of a house that once held laughter. The silence of a man who still had stories left to tell. And the steady, aching voice of Sally Struthers reminding the world that this didn't have to end this way. This story is still unfolding and will continue to follow confirmed developments carefully, separating fact from speculation every step of the way. For now, don't treat this as entertainment. Treat it as a reminder. Check on the people around you. Notice when someone pulls away. Listen when behavior changes. Because sometimes the brightest smiles hide the heaviest weight. If this story meant something to you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it so the conversation doesn't disappear. Drop your thoughts in the comments, respectfully, and stay with us. We'll continue covering verified updates as this story develops.